But like I said, we're going to start with a tangent. There are all these threads. This is going to be a little bit of like jumping around because there's so many threads. But we're going to start with Ingsoc. Ingsoc is the name of the totalitarian government in 1984, and that's what I'm referring to call the Fabian Society. So two-tier Keir Starmer in Britain is a Fabian socialist. The Fabian socialists are not new. In fact, most of the prime ministers in most of the British Commonwealth throughout almost all of history, Australia, Canada, and so on, have had Fabian ties if they weren't outright Fabians. I think it's true, somebody can fact check, it's either every or almost every prime minister of Australia has been connected to the Fabians. You would know the Fabians probably by their softer name that they frequently use in public, which is the Labour Party, which is a little bit scary when you realize how well they've been doing. Ingsoc, I-N-G-S-O-C, was an abbreviation, a creative abbreviation for English socialism. And changing the E to an I think, is really clever because it has that idea like they're just barely hiding themselves. This is exactly the same English socialism that Engels criticized as not being able to get its act together. But their goal was very different. It was actually to very slowly infiltrate and subvert. This is when this model, I was going to tell you something I haven't told you yet. This is when George Bernard Shaw said, that's later. I've been reading my notes that you haven't read yet. They were going to infiltrate and take over from within, which should feel very familiar. You hear Klaus Schwab say, penetrate the cabinets. Well, that's a very English socialism method. Although that does have roots back to Lenin. Lenin said the best way to control the opposition is to control it yourself, or to become the opposition from the inside. So this infiltration conspiracy thing, pretending to be your enemy. There's an old saying, it's on Beautiful Trouble, their activist website, dress like a Republican so you can speak like an anarchist. And they do this a lot. And I would recommend to you that you consider that our side fighting back against this is much more infiltrated than you probably realize. There are probably a lot of actors who are dressing like Republicans so they can speak in ways that bring agitprop to our class, if you will, our political class. So what was Orwell writing in 1984? Orwell was most likely, nowhere does he ever explicitly say this. There are strong hints in his Road to Wigan Pier, but he nowhere explicitly said that this is what he was doing. But the best guess of what 1984 represents is characterizing the Fabian socialists spending a century to gain the power of Stalin. The Fabian Society was founded in 1884. Now, Orwell was tricky. He published 1984 in 1948, so he said that he just swapped the order of the number of the year. But as a matter of fact, it's very likely that he was imagining the Fabians operating slowly for a century. They have a symbol that's a tortoise or a turtle. I think it's a turtle, not a tortoise. And it says underneath it, when I strike hard. So you slowly infiltrate, and then all of a sudden it's like it came out of nowhere all at once everywhere. The British right now are all asking in the UK, how did this happen so fast? It's like it didn't. It happened over 100 years, and they didn't tell you until they thought they had enough power with these last couple of recent big wins to reveal themselves. So when I strike hard. So they hide themselves and then hit as hard as they can all at once. But like I said, this is the model of incrementalist socialism. It's basically the long march through the institutions British style as opposed to Marxist style. And because of this difference, and we're focusing on communism and Marxism in particular, that's why this is a kind of tangent. Their goals are political, cultural, and corporate capture from within. Those are their main agendas. Infiltrate the boards, infiltrate the committees, infiltrate the governments. They use education as much as they can as a route. So the most famous educational institution they founded is called the London School of Economics. If you go there, there's a gigantic globe outside on the campus that is upside down. So turn the world upside down is the imagery. The big players, the big characters, there are more, but I'm going to name George Bernard Shaw, Sidney and Beatrice Webb, and Annie Besant, but there were lots more. This isn't a big Fabian lecture, and I'm actually not qualified to give a deep Fabian lecture. There are people in the room who are, so I'm not going to embarrass myself that way. There's a symbol that they have also at the London School of Economics, which by absolutely dumb luck, the whole team here and I had the good luck to see with our own eyes. last, I guess, October. We walked over to the London School of Economics. Mike, who's doing the sound and speaking, the voice in the back, has had this vision of seeing the Fabian window, which is a stained glass window that they had made of themselves for years and years. It's in the George Bernard Shaw Library at the London School of Economics. They don't let people in for whatever set of reasons. So we show up, we're all dressed up, and it turns out that there was a funeral in the room. So we're dressed up and we say, can we go up to the George Bernard Shaw Library? And they say, are you on the list? And we say, what list? And the guy doesn't, being very British, doesn't want to say we can't go to the funeral. So he says, oh, just put your names on the list and go on up. So we put our names on the list. We went on up, we crash a funeral, we see the Fabian window. There it is, it's real. It's really fun. So we actually did see it, but the idea is it shows George Bernard Shaw and I think Sidney Webb with hammers and an anvil between them, and on the anvil is the earth heated to red hot, and they're beating it, while the other Fabians are working the bellows, which would be similar to the British version of Lenin's agitprop, to heat the world up, smash it to bits, and it says across the top, remold it nearer thine heart's desire. So they're going to heat the world up, which I think we're experiencing right now. Look at Britain under Ingsoc now, look at the heat. And then they're going to smash it to pieces, and then they're going to put it back together the way they want. In other words, they have predetermined solutions for the crises that they're stimulating. And it's actually, there's a stained glass window commemorating that that's their vision. It turns out that George Bernard Shaw, his play My Fair Lady was originally titled Pygmalion. We talked about the Pygmalion myth last night. Turns out that's exactly the same thing. You're going to see if we can take a street rat and convince people she is what she isn't. And it's actually and if she is, then she gets to, basically the gentlemen win the bet, and maybe she gets to pretend she's a noble for the rest of her life. Now, these guys at the Fabians rejected violent revolution, so they're not Marxist. They're still communist. Actually, you'll hear George Bernard Shaw in a second say that he's a flaming hot communist. But they did not like the idea of violent revolution. This is all subversive, which is why it fits into this besides being Western. So this is a difference of methods, but not beliefs. As far as the underlying religious beliefs of transforming the world, we just heard the Fabian window actually portrays that. And imagine making a stained glass window, which is kind of, we associate this with churches, to commemorate that that's your view of the world. On that window, by the way, I think I have it in here somewhere else, but I want to just point out they have their coat of arms. The coat of arms for the Fabian Society is literally a wolf in sheep's clothing. It is literally that. You can look it up yourself whenever you want. It is literally, go to your search engine, type in coat of arms Fabians, and you're going to see a wolf in sheep's clothing on a shield. So this is a difference of methods, like I said, but not of beliefs. Here's George Bernard Shaw saying exactly that. He says, until you have socialism, you will never have state solidity, because as we know, if you have private property, you will immediately split your stake. So there it is, he's against private property. He said, you will get the class conflict, the class struggle, the confrontation of interests between the proprietors and between the proletariat. And therefore, you have something that is crumbling, that is divided against itself. And then he added, as a red-hot communist, I am in favor of fascism. The only drawback to Sir Oswald Mosley's movement is that it's not quite British enough. I really encourage you to look up some videos of the things George Bernard Shaw said, so you can hear it in his squeaky little oily, smiley voice. Turns out this Oswald Mosley was a British aristocrat who was a socialist and funded a lot of socialist activities and got pissed off that it wasn't going fast enough, it wasn't working, so he became a fascist in the early 1930s. And so what's Ingsoc? What is English socialism? It's communism with British intelligence characteristics is what it is. And it operates through infiltration to set up a liberal conservative dialectic in the cabinets. In other words, a uniparty. We call them rhinos, or we used to. We call them NatCon now. That's a very controversial statement. But it's Klaus Schwab's penetrate the cabinets method, which is, like I said, has links to Lenin, but it's very British and slick and polite and kindly. So here's the sickly kindliness. And I really, really hope you'll look this video up. You can watch this. We'll definitely have to throw this in when we put this together, of George Bernard Shaw actually saying a very sickly, kindly, very communist thing. And it's really great in his oily little voice. So you'll get what you need to search to find it. It's very easy to find.
I don't want to punish anybody, but there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit, but it must be evident to all of you. You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social boat, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us and it can't be of very much use to yourself.